Greetings, ladies and mental gents, and welcome to my channel, where I like to make audio narrations of various stories from the internet. In this video, we will be focusing on a story from the subreddit HFY, called Billy Bob Space Trucker, Chapter 5, written by Regal Legal Eagle. The link to the original story will be down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Humans were a paranoid lot after their first contact with the xeno species involved a fight for their survival. And it didn't help that for all the actions of the Unified Human Government, or UHG, took to persuade the galactic government humans weren't all that bad, the Americans surged ahead with the defense spending and espionage. Of course, in a way that worked to everyone's advantage. The UHG got to say truthfully that they had no control over the Americans, who rampantly provoked xenos in their borders, and spied on everyone they possibly could, while then giving what they gained or learned to the UHG. Since the spacefaring species all had one government, the xenos simply assumed Americans were some sort of subspecies and treated each government as entirely separate entities. One such espionage program the Americans had been going took advantage of the fact that humans didn't mind being out in the void of deep space. They had taken up major contracts with the Xenos to repair and construct new FTL comm buoys, and then some of the galactic government comm lines. Since no one else was willing to go out and physically inspect these buoys in deep space, they didn't notice that the new attachments that the Americans' crews left behind. Small, robotic operators would monitor all the Xenos traffic and copy it off back to Intel stations. With every passing year, the network got larger as the Xenos mistook the human fanaticism for repairing and updating comm buoys for the desire to prove themselves to the spacefaring species. At one of those Intel stations, however, a tech was sipping a cup of coffee when he noticed the flashing light on his console. Bringing up the communications packet sent to him by a spy operator designated IHC, his eyebrows quickly shot up. "Sir!" he called, waving over the superior. Specialist Rebecca Jones moved over and leaned over to see what her tech had found. "I'm not sure how credible this is, but someone is setting up an open bounty on a human. They also appear to be sending military orders to naval vessels. Do we know much about the species?" "Some sort of spacecraft, sir." She nodded as she read over the information on the screen. "Find out where the space is. I'll contact Langley and have them prep a carrier fleet. If they prove hostile, we'll cross a few cities and see how they feel about that." "Yes, sir. What should I do about the endangered human? Is he American?" "I'll have to do some digging, but it sounds like he's a space trucker, so there's a very good chance he is." She nodded, and that thought it over. "I'm sure he can handle himself then, if he's a space trucker. But I'll see about getting some agents to track him down, and see if he's getting us involved in a war." "Take him out? Frick no. If a lone American pisses off some Xenos so much that they declare war on us and make them aggressors. Galactic law clearly states defenders have free rein in combat against aggressors so long as they don't engage in mass genocide. If they have any valuable resources, we can take the planets and toss them out of the UHG. Another flashing light made the tech tap in the console once more. "Sir, it seems another Xeno species is trying to find out where the main diplomatic center is so that they can make some sort of official negotiations." "What? Where are they sending the communications? The UHG Central?" "No, sir. They're trying to contact Washington directly. Apparently they're interested in an alliance after meeting with some guy named Billy Bob Space Trucker." Emily couldn't believe the varied and intense music that Billy Bob had to listen to while he stepped through his own rest cycle. From what she understood, this was all pre-contact music. How had one species developed so many varied genres, all on their own? Most species had one or two styles that carried across their music. But the only style that she could find that connected human music was their love for repetitive beats or a chorus in their songs. That and most of their music seemed to make war chants and combat songs, but that might be just Billy Bob's music. The first record that she listened to, written by someone named Floyd of Pink, had been especially hauntingly beautiful. When Billy Bob had finally started to stir, she realized that she'd skipped her second sleep cycle. and just to listen to the music. Her body was a little sore from the lack of rest at this point, and she needed some time to process the music that she'd been enthralled by. So when he woke up and she began to move back to the bunk. "I'm going to have a sleep for this first chunk of the driving, Billy Bob. You know where to go." The trucker pulled out his hat back into place when he nodded. Getting up and walking back through the cabin, he found Mittens quickly hop off the bunk before Emily could toss him off and followed along behind the trucker. "Sure, but I need to work out a bit. Keeping the cabin set to galactic static gravity for you kinda loosens up my muscles a bit too much." She nodded as he quickly pulled out a can of cat food from the cupboard, popping the lid before slapping the puck of meat onto a plate for Mittens. And then he walked back into the main cargo hold of the ship. Crates lining the walls stacked all the way up to the ceiling, filled with the supplies for the agri-colony that he had taken them to. Cranking up the gravity to Earth norms, he tapped on the console to slide from some music going. "All right, calisthenics, then weightlifting," he said with a nod. Rising up, back on the streets, his face was set as he began to run up the length of the Longhorn's cargo bay, starting his workout. In the end, he spent a full hour running, jumping jacks, push-ups, crunches, lifting crates, pull-ups, everything that he could think of with what he had in the cargo bay. Billy Bob was no stranger to fights, and it seemed like his new friend was going to get him into more than usual, so he needed to work out a bit more to prepare for it. He might have a decent-sized beer gut, but he was a blue-collar man all in all. Under that fat was muscle. His arms were still strong, and he even didn't work out his bodybuilder levels. He didn't need to get some sort of scientific gym workout. He just needed a good old-fashioned exercise, and to keep punching things in the face. Once he was done with his sweating pretty good, and he figured it was time for a shower. Careful not to make too much noise walking through the cabin, he slipped into the bathroom and stared up at the shower. Once he was cleaning up that he had reminded himself not to sing like he usually did. Didn't need Emily groggily waking up to an off-key Tom Petty, or similar. Then clean and dry, he got dressed again, and got to the Longhorn fired back up before moving back into the FDL lane. The prospect of an illegal space goblin market excited him. Maybe he'd get real meat. Well, space meat. The burger, space burger, the day before had reminded him how much better real stuff was compared to protein mush. He picked up his headphones, setting them on his place as Mittens hopped onto his co-pilot seat. "You excited for some real meat, Mittens? Maybe buy you one of those space rats to hunt in the cargo bay." He reached over and gave the cat a little few rubs, and then turned up his music. He couldn't sing to Tom Petty in the shower, but this was good too. Well, she was an American girl. When Emily got up, she booted Mittens from the co-pilot seat and enjoyed more music with Billy Bob. He had to explain that the British invasion wasn't actually an invasion. American musicians were the great, but they didn't mean other nations couldn't create some amazing artists too. She was confused how Americans seemed to be friendly with the British after the Revolution, and he explained to her that it was a bit like a father and son who hated each other and got into fights. The dad had been a big and mean, so his kid grew up to be his shadow. But over time the dad got older and weaker, and his kid got bigger and stronger, and just as mean. So they managed to connect again as friends instead of enemies, thanks to the mutual hatred of various things. Like one of those sappy movies. Sorta. Several hours later, then she took another nap before they arrived at the station. When she got up of the second time, and they were almost at it. The space goblins had set up a station in the shadow of some sort of dead moon in a creepy-looking system that had a number of dead rock planets and a white dwarf in the center. Okay, you're going to have to be careful here. These sorts of stations attract all sorts of death wielders, even ones who can give you trouble. I should be able to talk us in. He shook his head at that. Oh, no. I know these sorts of places, and you're my guest, and you're not talking us in anywhere. I've got this. The station didn't look like the basic refueling station. Instead, the ships had to dock along with the same face of the station, and there wasn't a cargo hauler to be seen. There were sleek, purpose-built vessels of war, smaller-scale capital ships, and pirated patrol crafts. His long horn stuck out like a sore thumb. But then again, it did that around cargo ships too. Human ships, in general, just didn't fit in. Once he was docked and it was time to change, he opened up the security locker and began to dress more appropriately for the job at hand. He kept his jeans and plaid shirt, but lost the cowboy boots in favor of steel-toed ones. The hot sauce holster came off and the regular holster came on. He tucked his M1911 into his holster and tucked 6 extra magazines into the pockets around his holster. After that, he pulled on a black combat vest with a mix of ceramic and Kevlar plating. Then he slung his Remington Tactical 2070 over his shoulder before filling in his combat pockets with various slugs, buckshot and birdshot rounds. A few Dragon Breath rounds as well as the off chance that he needed them. And finally he tucked a Bowie knife into his left boot and another into his belt. Pulling his Remington off of his back, he loaded a few rounds in and then worked the pump with a very satisfying ka-chunk. Lock and load. Emily was about to talk when he quickly slung the Remington back over his shoulder. "Oh, wait, hold on." He then pulled free the locker, a wooden Louisville slugger, with the words MLB Prime Ash burned into the side, and replaced his hat with a camel one with just the American flag on it. "All right, now I'm ready." His Louisville had a few scratches and some stains from the previous use, but he wouldn't trade it for the world. Any world. "What are those things?" she asked, pointing at his M1911 and Remington. "Oh, I forgot these aren't common. So, you know how galactic government has strict laws against weapons possession and stuff? Well, they don't have very strict laws regarding ceremonial cultural items. They also don't have a concept of firearms. All you Xenos have been using energy weapons and stuff for centuries. Not humans. These are what we call guns. They house these little casings filled with chemicals that fire off once we pull the trigger. It causes a small controlled explosion that launches a chunk of metal a few hundred feet a second. The action ejects the casing and pushes up a new round. In this gun, he patted the 1911. But this one requires me to work the pump. You'll see if I need to use them. Emily's mouth hung open as he explained to her what he was using. You covered yourself in explosives. Well, they're made to not go off until I want them to. But yes. How do you control such weapons? You don't have a targeting computer on your eye. Those are tightly restricted. Freck, humans don't need them. I guess we're lucky enough to evolve the concept of tracking depth and movement and stuff. I don't know. Physics. You saw me hit that space flecko yesterday with the bottle. She paused and gave a shrug. I guess I'll trust you. He grinned at her and then moved to the airlock. Hopefully you won't need to use them. He looked back at her with a thought it over. Actually, might be more fun if I need to. He smiled wide as the airlock cycled, and he stepped through into the station. Unlike the clean, well-lit refueling centers that he was used to, this place had those stupid flicking lights from horror movies. He glared up at the ceiling for a moment. He hated those stupid flicking lights. There were stains here and there on the walls as he walked towards the entrance of the main station, and couldn't help but grin as he saw 5 figures manning some sort of security station. These looked like blue space orc bears with horns and long tails, but really with such underbites and big figures and guts that he figured they were more like space bouncers. Then again, space borks. He nodded. Yeah, space borks. They had an assortment of weapons and targeting computers over their faces, which meant that space goblins had to be connected. However, from what he could see, they were wearing just normal clothes, with those shield belt type things. Lazy Xenos always figuring weapons were energy-based. But one in front looked bored as he stepped up, holding his hand and grunted at Billy Bob. Stop right there, ugly. We don't know you, and he didn't get further than that. Billy Bob picked up his pace and jogged and swung as he moved. The bat collided with the fat, ugly head, snapping off a tusk as it sounded like he'd creamed a line drive past third base. As the rest began to perk up with it pretty much too late, Billy Bob was already up close. The second one he slammed to the side with a knee. There was a sickening crack as the creature howled and toppled like a falling tree. The third he jabbed in the face with the end of the bat, crunching the targeting computer in his 4 eyes. It cried out and clutched its face while he moved on. The fourth had been stupid enough to leave his weapon on a crate, and as he reached for it, Billy Bob brought his steel-toed boot into the space Bork's hand. As it squealed and looked at him in terror, Billy Bob brought the bat down on its head. Good night. The last finally heard the high-pitched tone of a weapon lock and growled as he was prepared to fire. But Billy Bob was faster, and he pulled the knife from his belt, tossing it at the Bork's arm, sinking the blade into the creature's shoulder. It howled and dropped the weapon, dripping blue blood and gulping in terror. Billy Bob slowly approached as it gasped, Why are you here? Billy Bob stepped up to the larger creature and yanked the blade free, wiping it off with the Bork's fur before slipping it back into his belt. He then held the bat in one hand, resting it over his shoulder. Us, we came to party. Now take me to your leader. End of Chapter 5. If you enjoyed this story and wish to support the author, the link is down below. If you would like to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so. They will also be listed in the description down below. But the easiest way to help this channel is to share it, subscribe, and like. And, as always, I will see you all in the next video, and I hope that you have a good one. Cheers!